Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be explaining in this video how to use Excel to create graphs, and then specifically how you can create a job plot with a trend line and an equation for the trend line, and how to make your graph look nice and pretty for the Solution Stoichiometry Lab. So what I have here is, all I've done is I've opened up Excel and I've entered in the data that I want to graph. I titled these first two cells x-axis and y-axis. You do not have to do that. But when you are creating a graph, it's important that you put your x-axis data in the very first column and the y-axis data in the second column. So all you're going to do is enter in, for x-axis it would be milliliters of sodium hydroxide, and for y-axis it would be your overall change in temperature. You're just entering in those values in the two columns. In order to create the graph, this is super easy. It's ridiculously easy. All you're going to do is highlight all the data that you want to graph. So highlight the cells. Then you're going to go up to Insert. And by the way, I will add that things might be slightly different if you have a different version of Microsoft Office than what I have, but the idea is similar. You're going to go up to Insert, and then you're going to see right here all these lovely little options for creating graphic representations of something. You could create a pie chart, you could create a bar graph, but what you want to create is an XY scatter plot. You don't want to hit line. Line, although it looks tempting, it'll basically make a line out of the x-axis information and then a separate line out of the y-axis. We don't want that because we see the x and y together as a plot point. So you want to go to XY scatter, and then you basically pick. Do you want the individual points? Do you want the points that are connected with loopy lines? Do you just want loopy lines? Do you want straight lines? I recommend going with this. You hit that button, and then ta-dow, you have a graph. You have created a graph. It really is that simple. Then if you want to change things, fundamentally the way Excel works is if you just click on, if you highlight something that you want to change and then right click on it, you'll be able to change that thing. So for example, let's say I want to change the increments on the x-axis right here. I don't like that it goes up by tens. So I'm going to just click on it, left click, and then now that I've done that, I'm going to, hold on, right click when it's highlighted, and you'll see that this menu has pulled up. If I go to Add Minor Grid Lines, oh look, it's given me additional grid lines that I can interpret that as. Right before I didn't have a ton of grid lines, but now I have lots, and that can be a little bit helpful as well. And let's say I want, rather than add grid lines, if I go to Format Axis, it brings this up, and this is where you change. If you don't want to see it going up by tens, then you would hit maximum. I'm sorry, major unit. The maximum says that it goes up until 50. So it would be, if you wanted to change, if you didn't want it to start at say 0, you would change the minimum here, but I do want it to start at 0, so I'm going to keep that. But say I don't want it to go up by 10, say it says tens here is the major unit. Say I want it to go up instead by, let's say, 2s. I'll enter in a 2, I'll hit OK, and then you'll see that instead of going by tens, it goes by 2. So I'm getting more information from that. Additionally, if I want to add titles to the axes and to the overall graph, which is very important, you cannot turn in a graph that doesn't have the axes labeled, then you're going to go up here to Layout. It's under Layout, and oh look, Chart Title, Axis Titles. If you want a chart title, Centered Overlay, and I'm like, I don't really like that. I don't like where it is. Let's pick the other one, Above the Chart. Oh, that's much nicer. And then Axis Titles, to add the x-axis title, primary horizontal axis title below axis, and then it's got that in. If you want to change it, you just click on it and highlight it. This would be your milliliters of sodium hydroxide, and adding in the y-axis title, you can do it any way you'd like. If you want to do it that way so that it's horizontal, that's fine. If you, this is under Layout, Axis Titles, if you want to do it so that it's vertical. I personally think that's a little obnoxious, but that's just me. You might like that. As long as your axes are labeled, you're good. And if you want to, and I'm going to show this right now, if you want to connect the points, then it's going to be under Add Trendline. So again, I wanted to add something or edit something that has to do with the data points. So what you do in Excel, just to show you again, is you click on the data points and then you right click and then it pulls up this thing that's add trendline. Trendline is basically your line of best fit. And you can tell Excel if you're looking for an exponential line, a linear line, a logarithmic line, etc., etc., etc. And this one would be linear. And you can display the equation on the chart. And we'll get to forecast later. Now, this added a trend line for all of the points together. And as you can see, if it's trying to have a trend line for all of these points, it's not really connecting all of them. So what I'm going to do now, so this is sort of that's just the basics of Excel. What I'm going to do now is show you how you can get two separate trend lines on the same plot from the same information. So I'm going to delete that graph because I don't really need that graph. So now basically the rest of this discussion is very, very job plot specific. The rest of that's just sort of Excel stuff in general. Excel is a fantastic tool. It's so easy to do stuff. You can get averages and standard deviations, and it's awesome. So this is our job plot specific information. So if you want to create the job plot that has two separate trend lines, because we're looking for the intersection of these two trend lines, then you're not going to graph all of your data at once. You're going to start by highlighting just the data. See, I'm stopping here because I see that I've got the maximum at 82, right? After 82 goes back down to 75. So this is sort of the first part where it's going up. And I'm going to create a graph that just has this. And then basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to later on add in this other stuff into the same graph. So I've highlighted the first half. Now I'm going to go to XY scatter. I'm going to make that graph. So this is my first graph. Okay, so this is basically telling Excel that this information is going to be separate from this information. Now I want to add in this information. So what I'm going to do, highlight the graph, and see how right now it's just the graph that's highlighted. Now I'm going to right click and I'm going to go down to select data. That's what you want, select data. And now basically Excel is saying, okay, this is the data that you've already selected. Now I'm going to say I want to add. I want to add in some new data. And we don't need the series name. What we need are the X values. And for X values, you've got your cursor here. Now I'm going to highlight the X values that I want to add. So Excel goes, okay, we're going to add in those X values. I'm deleting this for Y, but my cursor here, now I'm going to highlight the Y values, and then I'm going to hit OK. And then hit OK again, not cancel, hit OK again. And what you've done is created two separate sets of data. And Excel is recognizing that. It's given it a separate color on it. Now what you can do is you can add trend lines for each set of data. See, now when I click on it, Excel knows that this is separate from this. So again, just to show you what I did, I clicked on the graph. So I got plot area, then I right clicked, I went to select data, I went to add, I added in the X value, I highlighted the X values I wanted to add, I highlighted the Y values that I wanted to add, and I'm going to cancel this because I don't want to add any more. But now I'm going to click on the first set of information. I'm going to right click because I want to add a trend line, go down to add trend line. I want it to be linear. I want to display the equation on the chart. Sure, why not? It's up to you. You don't have to on this. But let's do that. Okay, and so what we have, and you can move this around, is we've got a trend line for the first half of the information. So now we're going to do the same thing. Click on the data for the other information and add trend line. I want it to be linear. We'll display the equation on the chart. Great, I've got let's move that. And we don't really need that. Mrs. Julian gets annoyed with useless keys. This is a fairly useless key. That goes away. What we have now are two trend lines, which is great. But what we really want is the intersection of them. So now, just like anything in Excel, you click on something if you want to edit it. See how I've got the trend line highlighted because it's got the points right there, right? Now, so now I'm going to right click, format trend line. And what you want to look at is the forecast. Now, the one that I highlighted, I want to continue it forward. So I'm going to forecast it forward. Let's say 5 points, essentially. And look, it extended the line. So now I'm going to do the exact same thing for the other one. Click on it, just left click, and then right click, format trend line. Now I want to forecast this one backwards. So, right, not because if I do it forwards, it's not going to be the interception point. And look, I have the interception point. And again, if you want to look more detailed at where that is occurring, then you go to the axis and you could go to add minor grid lines. And if you wanted even more information, again, format axis brings up your maximum and your minimum. You can change your minor unit from 2 to 1, so that you've got lots of information about where they're intercepting. If you want to do this for the Y, you just do it for the Y. Add minor grid lines, and then look, you've got a chart that's got a lot more information on it than Excel made on its own. And you've got your job plot. You have your points of intersection. You have your line of best fit. So that's how you use Excel. It's very, in my opinion, it's very, very easy to use. It's a very, very powerful tool. And what I'm showing you right here, this is just barely scratching the surface of what Excel can do. But this will help you make the graph for your first computer-generated graph of the year in AP Chem.